Hello, everybody. Welcome to the May 2023 SJAA Imaging SIG. Tonight we got Rich Klein, who's going to talk to us about Astro Pixel Processor. We've had so many talks about PixInsight and the like, and it's good to hear about something new. So take it away, Rich.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Share. And minimizing the gallery up there. Okay. So as I said, I'll be talking about Astro Pixel Processor, and which is an interesting program for deep sky processing, which is not PixInsight. And my name is Rich Klein. I've been with the Astronomy Association for a couple of years. I would say I'm kind of an intermediate astrophotographer, and my presentation is probably not quite targeted for this audience because it is, because of the nature of the program, more or less oriented towards beginning astrophotographers, and you'll see why later. Okay, so introduction, 4 parts to the talk. Introduction, what it is, how to get it, how much it costs. And then the majority of the presentation will be the demo. I will load and process an image from soup to nuts through getting the calibration files, calibrating everything, stacking it, and doing initial post-processing in APP. Then I'll step out and do some beauty touches using external programs like GIMP, which is like Photoshop, and Topaz Denoise, and then finally Q&A, if any. I have about 45 minutes of content. So if I get through it in 45 minutes, Hi tells me that this is some kind of a record. So we'll see. Okay, introduction. What is Astro Pixel Processor? If you go to the website, poke around, you see it's a complete deep sky image processing application with several innovative features and a straightforward workflow written by Dr. Mabula van der Kamp. And Dr. van der Kamp is a Dutch astrophysicist slash mathematician slash programmer who is very capable and wrote almost the whole thing himself. And he's one of these guys, it seems, that likes to do everything himself. For example, if you poke around on the APP forums, you'll see somebody ask him, hey, can you make a plugin for Blur Exterminator? That's a pretty cool tool. He says, yeah, well, I think I'd rather program that myself using neural nets, and we'll get it in version 3 or 4. So that kind of thing. All right, so some of the things you could do with APP straight off the website: image calibration, accurate star analysis, registration, dynamic distortion correction, which most people won't need, but there is a very good mosaic capability. Advanced data normalization, I'll show an example of that. Drizzle support, I don't use Drizzle, who cares? Advanced integration and stack engine, including a variety of outlier rejection filters, and you can make rejection and normalization maps, which can be interesting. A bunch of batch tools if you want to work on a lot of frames at the same time. A rather nice light pollution and gradient removal tool, analogous to DBE, but different. You can do star color calibration using the choice of models, which is nice. And of course, you can split RGB data into separate channels for combination, and there's an RGB composite tool for putting your channels back together again to make the various different palettes. There's a selective color tool, which is analogous to pixel math, to selectively adjust the colors of your image and boost saturation of luminance. Okay, so that is kind of like what you'd expect. And well, he thinks that there are some unique features, also ripped off on the website. There is an advanced debayer algorithm he calls adaptive area disk, which is purported to reduce green or magenta cast and makes rounder stars. I've always used this, but never done an A to B comparison with other algorithms. I couldn't tell you what the precise difference is, but it does seem to work quite well. One thing that's very handy for me is debayer algorithms for direct processing of narrowband data acquired with one-shot color cameras. I use a one-shot color camera, and so sometimes I'll use filters like the Optilong L Extreme, which has hydrogen alpha at 03. So I can do HAO3 extract HA, HAO3 extract O3, and process them independently and then recombine them, which is nice. Vignetting correction tool for use if you have took images without flats. It tries to compute what the vignetting is and then subtract it out. I have not actually used it. The ability to create huge mosaics. This one down here in the bottom right is 32 panels automatically by solving a registration problem of all mosaic problems at once. And in this image in the lower right, they've intentionally not done normalization so you can see the different panels. And it was taken with 2 or 3 different optical systems as well. As I mentioned, advanced normalization correction between frames using only the reference area if you're stacking only, if you want to stack only part of the image, and local normalization correction within frames, which works pretty well, but is very time consuming. Also multi-band blending to eliminate artifacts from seams in a mosaic integration. And here on the bottom left, you see 3 different mosaics of the Rosette Nebula. The left one is supposed to have conventional normalization, the middle one with the advanced normalization that APP does, and then this one is with APP's normalization plus multi-band blending. And these are normalization weight maps, and the more uniform they are, supposedly, the better. Okay, so that's all nice, but why should you use this? And this is where I'm targeting this again towards people getting started in the hobby. Many astrophotographers get started incrementally. They start with a DSLR, and they start using freeware programs like Backyard EOS, Deep Sky Stacker, and Photoshop or GIMP. They generate images that way. I started with an alt-azimuth mount, but I still was able to stack things together using those tools. So APP is a logical and straightforward step from that. It has a shallow learning curve compared to other programs. I'm looking at UPixInsight. The workflow is clearly defined, and the default settings in almost all the tools work really well, so that even inexperienced astrophotographers can create quite good images. And I'll touch on both of those points again as they're going through. The default, I'll do everything, almost everything in the processing on default. Here is a 4-panel mosaic I did of the Rosette Nebula. I had an 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope then with a long focal length and a correspondingly narrow field of view, so I had to do a mosaic just to get the Rosette Nebula. And you can tell I was inexperienced because if you look in this picture, the bottom right panel, the stars have these diffraction spikes on them because I left the Bahtinov mask on during exposure of that panel. Rookie mistake. But I just dumped all 240 frames into the hopper, set the settings for mosaic, and walked away and came back, and more or less this popped out. So that's pretty encouraging. All right, next step forward, how to get it. Very logically, astropixelprocessor.com is the website, and that website has a download subdirectory. The latest releases, I should go there. They're labeled beta, but they're really solid. The one I'm using here is 2.0, version 2.0 beta 17, and that was released, I think, about a month ago. If you want to try it, the licenses are, trial license is free for 30 days. Free is good. We like free. You could rent it for 60 euros for 1 year and own it for good for 165 euros. That includes upgrades, although I think he's left himself some wiggle room, like if we completely rewrite the program, maybe we'll ask for a little more money. But anyway, it's not so bad. So, demo. Tabs 0 through 6 and tools. So in this demo section, I'm going to be bopping back and forth between PowerPoint here and the Astro Pixel Processor, where I'll be clicking buttons basically. And but before we do that, I'll just show you what the data is. The target is the Horsehead and Flame nebulas. Acquisition telescope is 130 millimeter triplet refractor right there. The mount is a German equatorial mount. The camera is a one-shot color camera, the 294 MC. The filter is an Optolong L Pro, which is kind of sort of a broadband filter. The red curves here are the bandpass of the filter. The green lines are desirable emission nebula lines, and the yellow and brown lines are light pollution lines to get rid of, but as we talked about a while ago, nothing does much good for LED pollution, but I think it's a decent filter. Exposures, there are 45 exposures, 240 seconds, chilled camera. So this is only 3 hours of data, and it's going to end up looking like this. Okay, so let's go over to Astro Pixel Processor. I hope you can all see this. And when I showed this to Hai a couple of days ago, he says, well, this doesn't look very simple to me. But for those of us who went to engineering school, it's kind of like the first time you looked at an oscilloscope. It looks pretty complicated, but you very rapidly learn that there's only a couple of knobs and dials you have to pay attention to. So I'll walk you through what all is in here, and then we'll go through the process. All right, so this is what you just looked at. In the top left, there's a configuration area where you do the setup, set up the computer. And this red outlined area here is your workflow. There are 6 tabs, well, there are 7 tabs, 0 through 6, and then tools. And that's exactly what you're going to do. And workflow is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then tools, which is post-processing. And then it has its own ladder of tasks to do. There's never any question about what you have to do next. Below that, each tab brings up its own menu, which is in blue. So that's this area on the left. At the bottom is the frame list panel, where all the frames that you load and all the frames that it generates go down there, and it's floating, so you can pop it out and then look at any given frame. The big area in the middle, of course, is the image viewer. And on the right is a set of display controls, which governs how the image in the middle is shown. Astro Pixel Processor uses linear data for everything right until the end. And then, however, you'll be looking at stretch data in various ways, and that's governed by this panel here. Okay. In the configuration area, the first thing it'll ask you to set a working directory. And so the ideal setup, I think, is to have a directory that can, above that, which contains the working directory, your lights and your calibration files. And otherwise, you have to know where everything is. And you can also, in this area, allocate how many compute resources go to Astro Pixel Processor. And here on this slider, I've set it to 10 out of 12 compute threads on my machine. You no longer have to allocate memory, it does it itself now. And then that's it for this area. So let me go to Astro Pixel Processor and do this. I'm going to set the working area to this one. And I still have it set to 10 out of 12 threads, so done here. Next up is tab 0. I've pulled the tab menu over here, and 2 versions of the tab menu. So you should only have to use tab 0 if you're shooting with a one-shot color or a DSLR. And this is so that the program can figure out what your color data looks like. In the case of a one-shot color, you have to set your color data, your Bayer pattern, which mine is like most RGGB. In the case of a DLR, DSLR, there's a limited number of those, and it can read the metadata and figure out what the Bayer pattern is. So you would just leave the pattern as supported. Then you choose the algorithm you want it to use to process the data. If it's color, I use his adaptive airy disk algorithm and leave it at that. If you're shooting in monochrome, or rather, if you're shooting with a filter, you can select which kind of filters and how you want to process it in the other menu selections here. Now, if you're shooting in monochrome, you won't be in this tab. You'll set all this stuff up when you go to tab 1. And finally, you're going to click Force Bayer. So let's go to Astro Pixel Processor and do this. We are in the raw fits tab, change the pattern to RGGB, and hit Force Bayer, and then we're done. Going to tab 1. And tab 1 is where you load all of your lights and your calibration files. If you're loading monochrome, you'll set up what filter it is, or what session you're on, etc. in this stage also. Well, if you've loaded everything up, you should pop out the frame list and verify that your various files are correctly matched with each other in terms of ISO, exposure, gain, etc., etc. And you can also pull up frames for display to verify that they look appropriate. So I'm going to go do that. I'm on tab 1. I'm going to load lights. Go up a level. Here are my lights. Select all, enter. And here, if these were monochrome data, I'd be telling it which filter I'm using. Here's LRGB, and then a bunch of different elemental, or not elemental, but emission line filters. But I'm not using any of these, so I'm defaulting through them. There's only one session. You can have multiple sessions that you can process through, default through that as well. And over here, I hope you can see that I've loaded 45 lights, which is the intention. Okay, let's go to flats. Load those. Select all. Open. Default. Default. And there's 12 flats. I'm going to do the dark flats next. That's what I have. Dark flats. Select all. Open. Default. Default. And I have darks as well, but because these came out of my calibration library, I also have a master dark here at the bottom, and I will just load the master dark because that will save some integration time in the next step. Okay. So if I open up the frame list panel, you can see here's all of the lights, flats, dark flats, and at the bottom is the master dark, and I'll click on that. It'll load it, and yeah, it looks like a master dark for the 294. This is all amp glow here, and it's amplified because of the stretch. Looking at a random data frame, there's data. Looks good. Could pull up another one. More data. This must have been after meridian flip because it's upside down. Okay. So we are done with this tab. I'm going to go on to tab 2, calibrate. What I'll do, because this will take 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to go back to APP, get it going, and then while it works, I'll talk to what it's doing. Okay, tab 2, calibrate. And the button to push is create masters and assign to lights. I'll wait here a minute and see that it gets going. Yep. All right, so on this tab, you have the option to select the integration and outlier rejection techniques for every all of the calibration frames, whether they be bias or master flat or darks or flats. And as you might have seen in other programs, if you have less than 20 frames, you can use median. And if you have more than 20, use average combined with outlier rejections. In reality, the only thing I've ever done is left all of these on automatic, and it seems to have been just fine. I typically have 12 to 16 calibration frames. People tell me I should use more, but that's all I have patience for. And leave it on automatic, and it seems we're pretty good. So then you can click the Create Masters and Assign to Lights. Let's go back to Astro Pixel Processor. It is cranking away. At the bottom, it has created, apart from the Master Dark I gave it, it has created the Master Dark Flat. And I think it's working on the Master Flat right now. Another thing about Astro Pixel Processor is that whenever it finishes one of the tabs where processing is involved, you get that gong sound so that if you're in another room, you can hear, oh, it's done. I have to go back and do something. Okay, next step is star analysis. And once again, I'm just going to kick it off and get it going because it'll take a couple of minutes as well. And then I'll switch to PowerPoint and tell you what it's like, what it's doing rather. Okay, let's go on. On star analysis, in comparison to PixInsight, APP does not have a tool like Blink where you can load through and load all your lights and step through them one by one. However, this step gives you some good tools, analytical tools to look at your frames and identify possible outliers for rejection. You can step through your frames one by one, but it'll take longer because it loads each frame up individually. I have never clicked cosmic ray or noise reducer. I should try that sometime. But if you're doing a normal single panel image, 500 stars to look for is a good number. If you're doing mosaics, you want to do 2000 or 2500. So then the program rips through all the light frames, analyzes them for counts, full width, half maximum, roundness, and it generates a quality score. For example, here, well, we're done. It received 10 of 45 frames to analyze, and it has a quality score of 165 and such full width and half maximum. It also generates very useful graphs for sorting and rejecting frames, and I will show you that right now. You get this. Analytical results per light frame normalized to 1, 1 being the best frame. So in this case, green here is the quality score. And going through it, you can see that there's 3 frames here in the middle with particularly low quality scores. And the last frame as well is not high quality either. So, and all of the other parameters seem to follow that trend as well. So those 4 are the things that are the ones that I think I'm going to get rid of. So here's the frameless panel, and here are the various either given or measured qualities. And here's quality. So I am going to sort on quality. Now that's changed the graph up here, so it's monotonic high to low, and we can see these 4 somewhat outlier frames here. It's a pretty graceful degradation down to here, and then there's 4 kind of low. And because I've sorted on quality, they're at the bottom. And if you can read the numbers or not, you can see that all these quality scores are below 100, and whereas the next one up is about 125. So I'm going to remove these. And you saw the graph jumped up to reflect that we no longer have those particular 4 frames. More stuff you can do right now. At this point, the frames have been calibrated, and highest frame here is 450, 405.9 quality score. We can look at it. Right now, I'm looking at the raw data, and if you look closely, you can still see the ghost of the amp glow up here, but we can also look at the calibrated frame, which is now being pulled up, and the amp glow disappeared. And you might get a feel that the background is somewhat flatter, which is what we'd expect because it has had the flats applied to it. If you like, you can do a fast and dirty neutralization of the background to see what it, more or less actually looks like. And there you see the Horsehead and Flame nebulas with the green cast taken out. But I'm going to deneutralize because that'll get taken care of in further steps. Okay, the next step is to register them all, register the frames against each other. This is a really fast process, so I'm just going to, well, let me go back to PowerPoint and show it. Unless you click this and pick your own frame, it'll use the frame with the highest quality as the reference frame. It'll use quadrilaterals for the recognition pattern because it's robust and fast. If you have very few stars, you can choose triangles, but we have a fair amount of stars here. On mosaics, you can use quadrilaterals or pentagons, but I've always used quadrilaterals. Scale start and scale stoppers are excellent numbers for normal panels. For mosaics, you probably want to set the scale stop to 10 so that it can look further. I've never messed with a distortion model because I've only used one kind of optical system. Here you set normal versus mosaic registration mode. Just leave this be, and then you just hit start registration, and it's really fast. Once again, register, start registration. Okay, tab 5, normalize. This can take a few minutes, so I'm going to click the button and get it going, and then switch to PowerPoint to speak to what it's doing while it's working. Okay, it's starting. On normalization, it's pretty good at it. As long as all lights are of the same image scale, basically of the same thing, you're going to use regular mode. For mosaics, advanced mode gives better normalization results. Multiply scale will be used for almost everything, including mosaics, unless you combine, I was going to say if you combine different optical systems entirely, but never done that. I've always chosen to neutralize the background at this stage, but they caveat you that it can suppress some nebulosity. I haven't noticed that very much. And then this is the button that I pressed to get the process going. And a lot of the rest of these things that I've skipped over have to do with you who want to save frames at intermediate step, which I've never done. Okay, so at this point, we can now look at normalized frames, which will look a lot like frames you've seen before, honestly. There we go. And our friend, a satellite. Lovely. 2 satellites. So during the integration step, Winsorized projection should take care of that. Okay. What I'm going to do is, once again, get this going, but I'm actually not going to use all the defaults. I'm going to use average. I'm going to use Winsorized rejection because I find that's really pretty good for these satellites. And local normalization rejection going down. I'm not going to use the other within frame normalization rejection and hit integrate. We'll call this set flame HHF. All right, this will probably take about 3 minutes and might have some dead air after I finish speaking to the PowerPoint, but we'll let it get going and go back to PowerPoint. So stacking happens here. What I did was, since I have a one-shot color camera and I'm shooting color data, there's only one channel, so integrate per default is fine, integrate per channel. Likewise, this is only one 3-hour session, so integrate all, no multiple sessions. We pre-selected our data, went from 45 to 41 frames, so I'm going to take all of those. And like I said, I switched it to average and I maintained the weights on quality. I chose average because I have more than 20 frames and I want to force local normalization correction to Winsorized rejection, which I find works well for satellites. I'm using the default kappas. Had I chosen automatic here, I would still have gotten Winsorized rejection because of the number of frames, but I would still have gotten average integration, but I may or may not have gotten Winsorized, and I just wanted to make sure that I did. I'm not choosing local normalization correction because the data is pretty good, and this would at least triple the integration time. It's really pretty slow. Also, no multiband blending because this is not a mosaic. Once again, I forgot to do the reject the normalization maps. I wanted to make those to look at them. Well, another time. And there is the integrate button. So let's go back and see how it is doing. Oh no. Okay.
So it looks like you are doing LNC.
Looks like I am doing local normalization correction, but nope, it's done. So it's now doing the integration. This will take about a couple, 3 couple or 3 minutes from this point. It looked like it was doing local, but this is too fast for it to have completed. So, well, we'll see.
I got a question for you, Rich. So,
Sure.
So more or less, there's a, you go from what, 0, 1, 2, 3, and more or less you're picking the defaults. So I'm curious, can you just like say, just do it? And, at the start, like say, go and come back, have your coffee and have an image when you come back?
Man, you're a great straight man. I was just about to talk about that. Yes, you can. In fact, if you're confident in your data and you think you want to take all the frames and let the weighting take care of it, you can load your data and do the setup and then just click integrate, and it'll go through all the steps by itself. What I do is I do the setup, I load my data, and I go to step 3, which is analyze stars. And then I look at those graphs to see if there's any frames I particularly want to reject. And I reject those, and then I go straight to 6, to what I'm doing right now.
So I hear you. I was actually going, not just, I guess what I would call what you're doing right now, the pre-processing. The Pix Insight would, this would be the weighted batch pre-processing script or whatever. But I meant the whole image, like done,
Well, in the next tab is going to actually require some human input, so human intervention. So I think that this is the only step that you could get to right now, get to automatically. But I'll go through this, and then you can tell me if you think you can sort of automate it. So as Hai pointed out, up to now, this is the pre-processing, and tools is the post-processing menu. And it is far less rich than something like Pix Insight, but once again, there's a stable workflow, and you go from one through the other, and then you might want to step out and do a couple of other things. What we're going to do here is rotate it, crop it. It has some options to do a batch modify. And if you want to do a bunch of frames at the same time, change the metadata. It has a tool for correcting vignetting, which I've never used, but if you don't have flats, it looks at the frame, tries to figure out what the actual vignetting is, and then subtracts it out. We're going to remove light pollution. Has a fairly nice tool here, analogous to DBE, and you run it iteratively. Has a calibrate background tool, which you don't have to run if you've done the light pollution removal tool. And you can calibrate star colors with a choice of models. Sadly, he does not have photometric color calibration yet. And tools that I have used, but we won't use today, are the HSL selective color, which is analogous to pixel math. And it has a star reducer / star eliminator. It works, but like any of these tools, it's not perfect. I have a manual method in GIMP, which I use, which is about the same. So I'll go through these very quickly. First thing I'll do is do a rotate and resize. Yes. And what I'm going to do is flip it in X and flip it in Y. And that's just because I like having the horse head right side up. That's the only reason I'm doing that. So do that and then save. It will generate a new FITS file at the bottom. And we pull up that FITS file. Next step would be to crop it. And to crop it, this is a little bit clunky in my opinion. You would draw the cropping box, but having drawn it, you now can no longer move it around with your mouse. In fact, if you try, you'll just draw another box. So that's not the best. So what you do is you draw a box close to where you want it. And then down in this area here, you do the fine tuning and you input how many pixels in from the edge you want it. And having done this image a few times, I happen to know that, 50-ish pixels from the edge on all sides is a pretty good value. And you can probably see the green lines moving around. I'll move this one a lot. So that's too much I want. I'm going to move it back down to 50. There it is. And now I will crop it. So that's the crop tool. It creates a new file. And if you can see down here, you get each one of these files is saved in sequence. So you can go back and reprocess a step if you don't like it. And it's labeled with somewhat cryptic descriptor showing what the last step was on. Okay, we've pulled up the crop data file, and now we're going to remove light pollution. But before we do, what I'm going to do here is actually use this display control. And the most powerful part of this, or the most useful part, is this tab here, which has about, what is this, about 10 or 15 canned stretches from linear data to max stretch. And I'm going to use this setting for light pollution removal so that we can try to get as much detail on the nebulosity as possible. So I'm going to use a max stretch and remove light pollution tool. And what it wants you to do, instead of drawing the boxes for you, it wants you to draw boxes and go iteratively. In other words, start off with a few, it wants at least 5. Run the tool and then go back and then do some more. Recalculate. And as you can see, it pulled out a whole lot more nebulosity here. The colors indicate how well the model is working in these particular regions. They say to leave the flexibility at 1 because quote unquote gradients are rarely very complicated. I say that here in the Bay Area, with our various light domes and light pollution, the gradients can get complicated, so I give it a little more flexibility. So draw a few more boxes. I think I'll put one right in the horse head. It changed a little bit, so I will draw a few more boxes. I'm still getting a bad fit up here in this corner, but it's only the corner, so that's a low interest part. Once again, you're trying to draw these boxes, avoid bright stars. It can handle some stars. I try to draw them in star-free areas if I can, but I don't worry about it too much. Now recalculate. Okay, I didn't see it change much at all this time, so I think we're about done with this step, so I'm going to do OK and save. There it is, and let's reduce the stretch to something more reasonable. This is the stretch we've been working with up to now. There, so the image is starting to look fairly decent. Time to do color calibration, because you might be familiar with this image, and the flame nebula over here is a lot paler than the hydrogen alpha background of the horse head, and in this image, it's looking almost the same. So we'll calibrate the star colors. Like I said, unfortunately, it doesn't have photometric calibration, and it gives you an adaptive black body or a balanced RGB. And I happen to know that the adaptive black body, in cases where you have a lot of hydrogen alpha flying around, doesn't work that well. So I'm just going to do a simple balanced RGB and going to select. We don't actually have that many stars. Some star regions for analysis, and then run the tool. And that happened. That's what I was looking for came out of this. The flame nebula is now looking a lot more pale, and that's what I was looking for. So I will save this. Here's the image. It's starting to take shape. There's going to be a couple of more things that I'm going to do to it here. One is I'm going to increase the saturation. They have a default checkbox for that on this side, and that increased the saturation a little bit. They have a sharpness tool, which is not bad here. It's a slider. I will caution you about most of these. I'm not going to go into them. They're sliders and they're very sensitive, and you can get into a lot of trouble. The top one's the black point. This one's the white point. This is how the stretches are protected, etc. And but the sharpen tool is here. I'm just going to give it a good sharpening, and I'm looking to get a little more detail in the flame nebula, I hope. This tool will take a minute or two to run.
How do you know it's not done yet?
Do you see the bar up here? Or my mouse it right above the image, there's a progress bar.
Thanks.
Now look at the flame nebula carefully and see if any more detail pops out when it's done. I would say so. I think we got a little more detail out of that sharpening, so that's good. Right now, I'm going to save the data. Everything is linear up until now, but when we save it, I'm going to convert it to a TIFF. And the purists will be horrified, but I am not going to save linear data. I'm going to save it at a lower stretch level and then reapply, put the final stretching touches on it myself. While I'm waiting for it to do the stretch. Slowly finishing. Okay, so I've reduced the stretch, background is darker, and I'm going to save this. What it's doing now is converting this image into a TIFF file, which I'll then open in GIMP. Okay. Done. This is the directory that I was working in, and at the top is the TIFF file. So if I click this, it will open GIMP with this file in it, and there it is. So what I'm going to do here now is just some beauty touches. I'm going to do a couple of contrast enhancing stretches and maybe a little bit more saturation. So let us make another layer just for kicks and grins, so we're not overwriting. And then I'm going to use the curves tool. And on the curves tool, black space is around 10 here. Brighter parts of the nebula are 80, 55. Of course, the stars are real bright. There is some nebulosity here that I ideally like to preserve. That's around 13. So I'm going to anchor my curve a little bit below that and pull it up. That lightens things up, but let's not lighten the bright stuff up too much. Bring that back down. And so this is a usual contrast enhancement curve. I'm going to do this again. Now, dark space is around 12. Yeah, 10 to 12. We've got some nebulosity here. It's 15 or 16. It'd be nice to capture that. So anchor this. What do you think? Is this too garish? I don't think it's too garish. We like garish. All right. Now, what I'm going to do in addition is bump up the saturation a little bit, then we'll export it to another program. I like to do it by channel, so we'll increase the red saturation by about 30%. Green, maybe a little less. Yeah, blue. Similar amount. Okay, and then there's an image, and if you look at it, it is actually significantly overstretched and it's noisy as hell. But I'm going to take care of that in the next step, which is exporting it to Topaz AI Denoise. So I do an export. And just for simplicity and speed's sake, I'll horrify the purists and do it as a JPEG. Do a good quality JPEG. Okay, here's my JPEG, and here is Denoise. All I have to do is drag my JPEG into Denoise, and it will start working on the setting I had set up. So this is the end step of what I'm going to do today. Here's the picture. If you zoom in, this is the you can see all the noise that was here and in the Flame Nebula. And the Denoise maybe lost a little bit of detail, but it did a fine job of clearing up all the noise and highlighting the nebulosity, which is down here. I think if I were to do this again, I would probably do a little bit more contrast enhancement and make the background a little bit darker. In other words, so it looked a little bit more like this image I have here, where the contrast is up and the space is darker, but I got less of the nebulosity in this region. Anyway, this is the presentation high, and I think I did it in between 45 and 50 minutes. What do you think of that?
Well, the clock's not stopped yet. I mean, there's time.
Okay, well, I did my part. I can always decline any questions and call it done.
Hey, so here's a quick question to get things started. So one of the things that I normally do is, some sort of local contrast enhancement. And I think you can do that in GIMP, but I'm just curious, do you do that in GIMP? Do you do that in the first program or what? Or do you not?
Yeah, I have done that in GIMP. You have to outline the area you want to work on, and then you can do your curves in that area. And usually you'll do some feathering so that the contrast between the areas you've worked on and have not worked on are not too obvious. In fact, I've done that by layers, for example, in the Orion Nebula, right? So you'll do different stretches for the trapezium and then for the different layers of nebulosity around it.
I actually didn't mean that. I meant like, doing it on the whole image, but so you can do it with the, what is the name of, I know in Photoshop, what is the name of the tool that does the sharpening? But anyway, if you change the parameters of that and you give it a much broader, anyway.
Unsharp masking is
unsharp mask, right? So you know what I'm talking about, Francesco.
Yeah.
How would you describe that to do local contrast enhancement with unsharp mask?
Yeah, it's in PixInsight they call it local histogram equalization, which gives the idea of what it does. It uses an aperture of a few pixels, like 50 pixels, that runs across the image and tries to equalize the bright levels and the dark levels in each of those apertures, so to speak. I don't know how they manage to make it smooth though. Okay,
anyway, thanks.
Yeah, there is an unsharp mask in GIMP, but I have not used it for that application at all. One thing GIMP does not have is the generalized hyperbolic stretch, which was demonstrated to us for a while back. So I'm in the process of learning PixInsight, and I think I might end up migrating to something like use APP for pre-processing and then some basic post-processing steps, and then do the finish in PixInsight.
Okay.
Rich, I have a question. It's there's one step in the process. I don't know if it was live or it was a slide in which you did the color calibration, and the APP was showing some charts with the number of sample points and what looked like a fit to them. Do you still have it?
No, it was live.
Oh, it was live. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the fit seemed very off, meaning that the cloud of points showed that there was some trend, but the fitted line did not follow the trend. So I was wondering if there's a way to act on that.
Yeah, so on adaptive black body, I tried moving some of those around, and I couldn't get it to change very much. So your point is well taken. I will go back and look at that and see what I can do. I'll maybe get back to you offline, because it's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, this is the menu. We're not going to really do it, but I don't think I want to do this right now. I don't know what's going to happen if I do it to one that's already been calibrated.
No, don't worry.
Yeah.
All right. Are there some more questions?
I had a question. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So does APP support any sort of like plugin external scripts and things like PixInsight supports? Like if you want to enhance functionality, does it support anything?
Yeah. So this is what I talked about early in the presentation. This guy seems to want to do everything himself. And I will not guarantee that there are no plugins, but I've not heard or used any. It seems like an obvious way for quick improvement, but there could be personalities in the way.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
If you didn't have GIMP or Photoshop, is there tools within APP for doing some of the things that you did in GIMP?
Yeah.
Within APP?
Yes. Over here on the right, if you can see my mouse moving around, you can do a lot of stuff. But it's kind of like balancing a hippo on a tightrope. These sliders are very sensitive. You can change your black point, white point, and numerous things about the stretch. And I think you could achieve the same results, but they are not very user-friendly and very dangerous. You can get yourself into more trouble than it's worth. And so I use GIMP. It's freeware. You can download it and run it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I use GIMP too. Okay. Thanks.
mm-hmm. Sure.
Well, just as a general comment, isn't it interesting that there's, several options for free imaging, right? With open source software, Nina, K-Stars,
Yeah.
several others, but not for processing. For process, I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't earn their money for the hard work they do to write this software, but I'm just commenting that for processing, it seems all the tools, I mean, this one costs too. So
Cyril is free, actually. Cyril works pretty good, and it's free, open source.
So
Yeah.
Cyril is the example of the open source free. I haven't used that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I started with it, and they added a few more features with the latest release. So it is not as powerful as PixInsight, but it'll get you 90% of the way there, I think, with some of the tools that are there in it.
Similar to Astro Pixel Processor or different?
I think, yeah, it's. I mean, it's cross-platform, and it has a similar workflow-oriented things, and the UI is also not as intuitive as APP. It's similar in vein with PixInsight with a steep learning curve, but once you figure out all the issues with it, with the UI, then it actually is pretty fast. You can just dump your files in a certain folder structure, and you can just run a script to do the entire weighted batch pre-processing equivalent in Cyril, and then you have the image, and then you can do a lot of post-processing after the stacking is done.
Yeah.
It even has the added support for the global histogram, like the stretch functions and things like that, similar to how PixInsight has it. But I think the UI on Cyril is better for GHS.
Cool.
Yeah.
Maybe you should give us a presentation on Cyril, Raja.
There you go.
I have not used the latest greatest Cyril in a while now, but I moved over to PixInsight like a year and a half ago, and I'm still running PixInsight. It is vast. There's a lot of things in it, but Cyril is a great starting point if you don't want to spend money on a tool. It's amazing.
Yeah, the reason I asked for the one button, full process is it seems like, I mean, okay, so when I really want to, get a picture right, I'm going to make all these choices. But it seems like if I'm taking pictures over, 5 nights and I'm getting more and more data each night, it's sort of nice to see where you stand in the middle. And I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time processing day 2 or day 3, but if something comes out really nice, maybe I don't need to shoot this for another few days, that kind of thing. I don't know, that's something that I do.
So you mean like live stacking as you're imaging?
No, well, I mean, that I suppose is one answer, but no, I meant, like I'd be willing to, just take whatever I've collected so far, hit a button and wait an hour and, and have something pop out while I'm doing something else, and then see, is it worth shooting the same?
Oh, right.
Tonight? Do I want to improve on this, or am I more or less happy? I know I can improve it a little bit with my own techniques, but you get a rough idea of where you stand, I suppose. Anyway, that's just one thought that,
right. In Cyril, if you follow a directory structure, it is almost a one button click to stack everything to look at the output. So in PixInsight, I guess you have to go and load things a certain way through WBPP.
But in PixInsight, I would say I'm at the point where it's a one button click to go to reach the pre-processed masters.
Okay, so yeah, so you can.
I'm talking about from there, it still takes me a half hour.
Oh yeah, definitely. I don't know if there's any easy way to get there from there. Yeah, I don't know of anything. It'll be useful though.
All right, and any more questions for Rich? Should we allow him to set his record of, about an hour, or does somebody?
That's right, about an hour.
All right, then. Well, let's go.
I guess I was gonna.
Go
Well,
ahead,
since you're
please.
go, you said it was 165 euros for one. What's that convert to dollars? And what version is that? And how? Go ahead with the first answer.
Okay, the renter's license is 60 euros for a year, and to buy it is 165. These days, a euro is about $1.10, so multiply those by 1.1.
Dollar. Okay, and then what's the version number? What's the current version of APP?
The one I picked up last week was version 2.0 beta 17.
Version 2.0 beta 17, and that 165 will get you the 2.0 for life, but not feature up. You'd have to pay for feature upgrades, I'm assuming.
So he says it includes upgrades, but he leaves himself some wiggle room for if there are really major things, we might ask you to contribute a little more money. So I would interpret it as at least 2.0 for life, and then maybe a little more money for 3.0, but I don't know how that's going to shake out.
I believe there is also subscription. I use it on as a $50 per year subscription instead of buying it.
Right.
And
Yeah, you read it.
You have to renew every year for $50. Basically,
yeah, I prefer just to own things. And then would you recommend then playing with these freeware tools you mentioned, like Backyard EOS, Deep Sky Stack, or whatever, GIMP, etc., before you shell out money for the for APP?
Honestly, no. Well, GIMP is a useful thing to have in any case, but I think that that APP is better than Deep Sky Scap, the Deep Sky Stacker approach, if you intend on buying it. Now that I think about it, Backyard EOS, they do charge for that, but there are programs like digital camera control, which are freeware, that will control your Canon and most Nikon DSLRs. I mean, I use both of those.
And what's that one? What's that last one you said again that controls your
I think
camera?
it's literally digital camera control. If I'm not correct, I'll look it up and I'll post it on the imaging website, on the imaging bulletin board.
Control freeware. And then finally, how long did it take you to become proficient? Because it seemed like you went through a lot of kind of fast. How long did it take you to become proficient in APP?
I would say 2 or 3 months, processing a couple of images a week.
Okay.
Because the workflow is so organized, I mean, you can get through it without much problem. You just sort of learn about, oh, I want to arrange my directories like this, and I can reuse my master flash, if I haven't changed the setup and that kind of thing. And that'll save you time by not having to do, integrating the calibration files.
With 2-3 images a week. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for answering my questions.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, anybody else have questions for Rich? All right, well, unless I hear somebody else shouting in the next few seconds, everybody please unmute and say thank you and great job, Rich. We really appreciate it. And see everybody next time.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, Rich. Yeah, that was awesome.
Thanks a lot. Great program.
Thank you, Rich.
All right.